we serve a lot of users, and we know that everyone has their own way of doing work. So I'm not going to tell you should do anything.
Yeah.
But one thing we also launched in Gemini and Chrome is history recall. And we actually know a lot of people keep their tabs around because they're afraid of closing them because they don't know how to get back to it. Try it, but
yeah, Logan, you could be liberated of all these tabs.
Don't be
You know,
yeah.
trust the history recall feature. You'll love it. I'm a clean tabs person now. I just trust search. You know, I use Gemini all the time to find what I was left off with. So
I love that. I feel like I feel
You're
like
a tab hoarder.
I'm not a tab hoarder. Hey everyone, welcome back to Release Notes. My name is Logan Kilpatrick. I'm on the Google DeepMind team. Today we're talking about Gemini in Chrome. We've got Rick and Parisa. You want to sort of give context for this moment that we're sitting in now, where we just rolled out, I don't know if we describe it as the Gemini sidebar in Chrome or what the right vernacular is, but Gemini's in Chrome now.
Yeah, we're super pumped. This week we launched another really big update of Gemini in Chrome. It works across Windows and Mac and Chrome OS, and we brought a more integrated experience into it. And so you can open it, you know, with Control G or shortcut or a button to get a side panel experience that helps with multitasking, so you can have multiple conversations at once. We launched more integrations within the Google ecosystem and connected apps. So we're integrated with YouTube and Gmail and Flights and other apps. And then starting to roll out personal intelligence. And so you can have, continuity of conversations that you have within Gemini app, and any settings that you have in Gemini app help give you a more personal experience in Gemini and Chrome. And importantly, we're actually previewing something we're calling auto browse, and it's an agentic experience where Gemini and Chrome can actually browse for you and do some of the tedious, mundane digital laundry tasks of the web on your behalf. And that's something we previewed to our G1 and Ultra and Pro members. So big update.
I love that. we were talking off camera, I'm a proud Ultra customer. So I'm excited to always be trying new stuff.
You're on the cutting edge.
I'm on the cutting edge. I have lots of questions, and I'm excited to talk about browse and sort of all the impacts that has. I'm actually curious though, before we dive into some of the details, you mentioned end of last year, like the arc to get to the place where we are now, or like there's like literally a button that says Gemini, and hopefully we'll like bring Gemini to so many more folks. But yeah, I'm curious about that arc and like how we got to the place that we're in today.
you know, for a long time, the desktop with AI has evolved as a web app, a direct web app that you'd go to. And then mobile sort of evolved in a slightly different direction, where it was, a full mobile experience with lots of applications and with the assistant integrated, usually through, activation through a button press. And so they were like pretty different experiences. And we actually felt there was this really important opportunity to be able to bring some of the power that people have in using in-context assistance on a mobile device to the web applications they're using every day. And specifically, obviously, bringing that to Chrome was like a real key priority for us. And so the opportunity was to bring AI assistance like directly to where you were doing most of your daily workflow, and therefore enable multitasking and a lot more powerful experiences. And so that's exactly what we've just built. But it's been a long journey. It took us a while to figure out where it should be the same as mobile and where it should be different. And we really are happy with how it's turned out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think there's something really interesting about the unique fact that like Chrome in a lot of cases is actually like on somebody's device, versus you look at a lot of other Google surfaces and products and like they don't get that flexibility because it's a web app. And I'm curious, like, as you think about the Gemini or more broadly the AI story for Chrome, like unique and interesting things that maybe not yet or in the future like will unlock because you can actually download something onto a user's phone or laptop.
I mean, we think of Chrome as a platform in and of itself. It really is an operating system on top of your operating system, because we have users on Windows and Mac OS and Chrome OS, of course, it's our favorite desktop platform, at Linux, Android, iOS, and a lot of people use Chrome across different devices. And so they're already signing in and are able to get their stuff, like whether it's their autofill data, their credit card, passwords, their history. And it really helps you pick up where you left off across devices. And you can imagine with Gemini, we're bringing assistance and intelligence into the browser with your personal context. And so we can help on a lot of long-lived journeys. For example, shopping. Most people don't sit down and, buy a new car. Some people do. But for some, they're doing some research and some comparison shopping, and they're starting on one device and then maybe sitting down and picking things up on their laptop, or then leaving and picking things up on their phone. And so I think Gemini provides that assistance layer that can help with Chrome in your personal context and whatever the journey is you're doing, for much longer sessions that can span devices. And I see that as the opportunity. It doesn't have to just be long-lived devices. I use Gemini and Chrome for quick questions, whether it's like, okay, here's a really long lecture. I actually just don't want to sit through the full hour of it. Just give me the TLDR summary of the video and specific sections I can jump into, or summarizing across a bunch of different tabs. People in Chrome struggle, particularly on desktop, with like, I've got too many tabs. And whether you're trying to comparison shop or just synthesize across all those research papers and docs, having assistance right in the browser can really help you do that, so that you're not having to do as much context switching between different apps.
This too much tabs is like, or framed another way in the like AI moment, it's like you actually have too much context. Like, and I feel this way in my job. It's like, there's not a lack of context. It's like, how do I actually filter the context so that I don't see a million different things? I feel like the user journey for the last like 2 years with a lot of AI products is like, you actually have, back to this context problem, you have context in one of these surfaces, a browser tab, and then you actually have to like take a fraction of the context, a part of the context, and like leave where you are doing work. Hopefully folks will feel the power of like not actually having to do that.
Totally.
Being able to just have the,
And a little bit in the manual flow, some of the people in the team who are working on the product, their kids will organize schoolwork in tab groups. So it's like biology tab group. And you can see the power of being able to just ask Gemini, okay, come up with a quiz to help me prepare for my biology tab group. And I think we need to do even more proactive curation so that you don't have to rely on a tab group, but there is so much context in the browser. And if you can have that assistance within it, you're not having to like download and upload and copy and paste into some other app. And that just removes some of the friction from doing work on the web.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've implemented, which I think is great, is the integration of Nano Banana. So like, you can be on a web page and maybe you're trying to do some home decoration or something, and you could ask Gemini to change the color of the carpet or the sofa, and then you can see it like as it would appear on the page. And so it's like totally cool. These kinds of use cases that you would have to, as Parisa was saying, download the image, upload it to a different web app in a different tab. It's just made super easy with this integration.
The file formats aren't compatible.
Totally.
Gemini wants, PNG, it's a web web image or whatever.
So great for YouTube, for like reading a PDF, for like summarizing a super long email. It's just makes everything a lot more efficient and powerful.
Yeah, this tab groups piece, I'm actually curious if there's any suggestion for users. I am, as somebody who chronically has too many tabs open, is that like, as I think about Gemini and Chrome, like, should I be doing that, at least right now, like that like manual context engineering via tab groups as like a, for my internal projects, right? And that way I can sort of be more precise when I'm talking to Gemini and Chrome about like not making it try to, deduce the context correctly. Is that like actually a pro tip we should give people?
So we serve a lot of users, and we know that everyone has their own way of doing work. So I'm not going to tell you should do anything. That is something you can explore. But one thing we also launched in Gemini and Chrome is history recall. And we actually know a lot of people keep their tabs around because they're afraid of closing them because they don't know how to get back to it. It's loss aversion. In Gemini and Chrome, we made it easier to ask for what you had open and actually get it back. So it's like, if you know that you were searching for, I don't know, 3 Italian restaurants last week and you closed those tabs, you can ask Gemini and Chrome, what were those restaurants that I was searching for last week, and get the answer, which hopefully makes people a little bit more comfortable to close some tabs. You can manually create tab groups as well. Sometimes people do them in Windows. We try to make Chrome again, it's an operating system flexible to really work for a lot of different work styles. So try it, but
yeah, Logan, you can be liberated of all these tabs.
don't be,
You know,
yeah,
just trust the history recall feature. You'll love it.
And so it will like, and I'm like a docs, DAU, all that stuff. Is that a good example of like, I close all the docs tabs and then I'm like, tell me the projects my team is working on across, some specific category of stuff. Will it be able to get like, is it like caching like the last time I looked at it, or like would it actually know like, oh, and given like docs is maybe a tricky example because like it's live updating and like their context is actually changing on the fly from a week ago to today. Which version would it actually be looking at?
I think it would just summarize what you've looked at recently and then provide links like directly to the document.
Got it.
You could probably use that as a great jumping off point to get back to any place where you left off.
I like that. Do you two use tab groups?
I do sometimes for specific projects, or like we're doing annual reviews now.
Yeah.
So like I'll
Favorite
use
time
them.
of the year.
Yeah, not exactly, but yeah, yeah, I'll use them for one-off, and I also don't use them. I'm not as principled. We have people in my team who are very principled about how they use software and tools. I kind of go in and out of it. And I think what I like with Gemini and Chrome, you can add specific tabs in context for a one-off query. Like it'd be too heavyweight to actually create a tab group, at least for me, for that specific use case. But we're trying to really figure out what is this journey, what are the tabs that are the relevant context for you to ask about, and then you can just get rid of the group. But I don't know, do you use them?
No, never.
Yeah. So
interesting.
I'm a clean tabs person now. I just trust search. I use Gemini all the time to find what I was left off with. So
I love that. I feel like I feel
you're
like
a tab hoarder.
I'm not a tab hoarder. I feel like there's this goes back to the context problem. I feel like the context velocity, I feel like, is another thing where like there's just so much stuff happening all the time, and it's like I can't stay on top of it. And then I think the thing that forces me, and there's maybe some interesting Chrome feature in this, which is what forces me to close tabs, is when I switch off of an external monitor onto a laptop, it doesn't break, but like we stop being able to render all of the tabs because there's not enough space on the screen anymore. And when I unplug, and so that forces me to close tabs because I like can no longer, like, it makes it harder to use Chrome when I can't actually like click and see what all the tabs are. So it is like a manual cleanup process that forces me.
See, there's almost no difference between having infinite tabs and having zero.
That is,
because you can't tell which is which.
That is a good point. On this, I've had a bunch of conversations with Robbie from the search team about sort of this expansionary effect that AI is having for search, and like how people are using the product has changed. And I'm curious how people will interact with Chrome differently because of all these AI features and advancements relative than historically, like people's notion of like what a browser was.
I think this totally changes what a browser is. It's the big evolution in desktop computing has been that you spend most of your time in front of a browser. Most apps are web apps. And so you're using this for workflow, for communication, for kind of everything day to day. But what bringing Gemini into this means is that now you can start to, especially with all the new agentic capabilities, like you're starting to be able to automate some workflows. You're starting to be able to take care of things like asynchronously. One of the things a lot of people did over the holidays was someone planned the Thanksgiving dinner with their family. I got a doc with my kids' Christmas wish list, and I used Gemini to buy everything on it. It was awesome. And the auto browse capability or agentic capability integrated into there turns the browser a bit into like an automated workflow system. And I think this is like only scratching the surface of it, but I think this is a real beginning of a huge change in how people use computers.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think I can feel myself as I'm dog fooding and as we're shipping and improving, my own expectations and norms changing of what I can get done. And I think, you can command the browser to do something as, it's going to sound horrible, but like I'd ask my husband to help me with a task, and now I can ask Gemini and Chrome, like, hey, do this task for me. I need a white elephant gift. That's when I used.
I used it for that too.
In some ways, browser is the original user agent. It really is moving from, I think, this passive window that just renders content to being an agent on your behalf and being able to operate on the web and handle these complex tasks that typically require lots of manual work and actually can make progress, with you overseeing and making the fun decisions, maybe of picking something, and making the sensitive decisions of like, okay, finally taking the action on the purchase, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to see it evolve. Like, but we've had this assistance capability in phones for a long time, but there's something about the desktop experience where it's just richer and you can iterate more with it. And it really is now becoming more like an assistant, like what you would expect, like an assistant that you might work with to help you with. And it's so powerful for that. And it's really just, we're only starting with it. So I think there's so much potential in it.
It would actually be great if we can see some demos of Gemini and Chrome. So maybe we can kick off with a couple of them.
Yeah. Okay, so you said you just bought a new house.
Yes.
I'm assuming you want to personalize it.
And I have horrible taste. So this
you have
is
horrible taste.
I have horrible instincts. When I see
well,
great
let's
taste,
just see what those instincts are.
Yeah.
So like part of it is we wanted to build Nano Banana into Chrome so that you can really transform images on the fly in the context of things. This is a really simple example. I don't know, pick a color that you want to imagine this room with. Purple wall, like what color walls?
Let's use like dark blue walls.
Dark blue wall.
Could we get a little more? It feels these chairs don't look super comfy to me. So
and
maybe
more comfortable chairs.
because I play board. My main CUJ at the kitchen table is board games with my girlfriend, and so we're sitting there for an extended period. So I need comfy chairs.
Okay, that totally makes sense. And so we're using the Nano Banana model, obviously, and we got dark blue walls.
There you go.
There's sun cushions on those chairs.
That's better.
It's a super simple example.
It's a much better room.
It is much better.
It is better. Very profesh.
Whose house is this? This some random person.
This is a random picture on Redfin. It is Redfin.
You're dunking on this poor person.
Yeah,
saying my kitchen was fine.
We love your house.
Sure, it's cool.
It's gonna sell.
All right, so that's like just one example of Nano Banana. I'll show auto browse, and let's say I don't know if this makes sense, but you want to do a housewarming party that's pirate themed.
Let's do it.
Why not?
Let's do it. I'm intrigued.
And one of the cool things about Gemini is obviously multimodal, and so I'm gonna do an example of, I don't know, are you a big spender for parties?
Oh, we're spending big on this party.
Yeah, okay.
Can we come up with some really high quality pirate keepsakes that also just like aren't annoying? I don't know if that's too specific, but like I don't want to bring home
Come up with some
a pirate sword, but like is there any pirate themed interesting thing that would actually be useful in my life? I could give people to sort of remember this party.
Okay, and come up with some pirate keepsakes for people to take home. All right, so what you're gonna see here is, first of all, we're triggering when auto browse is enabled. And one of the challenges that we have is when a user, asks Gemini something, do they want just a direct response, or do they actually want you to do this browser task? And so the prompt I did was like, go to Etsy, find some supplies to recreate the decorations in this party photo. So it can tell that it's something to do with nautical and pirates. Apparently Y2K parties are really popular right now. So that was another example that one of our dog fooders had. And now it's going to Etsy. And you can see that in the background, you can see that it's actually navigating on Etsy. And so it sounds like you have opinions about specific things that people want, but right now it's searching for pirate swords, cutlasses. There's a range that you can find, and
I've got opinions like no
metal
swords.
It's going to plastic swords.
Good.
So that's probably both within budget as well as within safety.
Reduce my liability.
Exactly. And you can see over here, you can take over the task at any point, and on the right, you can see what the model is actually doing. And we don't expect that people are going to watch this. Like, the whole point is for us to take on some of those tasks that you don't want to do. And so we expect that people will do this on the background, and then you can go about, other tasks that you want to actually work on. And you can run multiple tasks at once. So that's an example of auto browse.
In this example, really quick, actually, did you direct it or you just like had Etsy open already and the assumption was, or did the model say like, oh, I'm going to go use Etsy to like try to find some of these pirate items?
I told it to go to Etsy, but
Got
you
it.
could also just, to make it go a little bit faster because I wanted it to go to Etsy.
Yeah.
But you could, ask it to generically buy something, and then it will use the search tool to find a place that it can actually
I
buy
bought
something.
Stanford basketball tickets the other day, and it decided to go to SeatGeek and find seats to what I asked for, and it was great. Totally worked.
That's awesome. Nice.
All right. I can show just like opening the side panel in general, because I think that really like being able to ask questions with a site or a YouTube video is what we see people using it the most for. Just this really quick Control G open.
Demis said this is his favorite use case. He
Yes.
just asks questions about YouTube videos.
Exactly.
I'm like,
and you can have, Rick was talking about this, the floaty. Some people still do like this, especially if they have a big monitor and they kind of want to see the agent task off in the side. But we're seeing people really excited about the side panel. And so I think, asking a more specific prompt about which hike I might want to go on in San Francisco is one example. One thing we're trying to do is also give suggestions of things that are relevant to the context. You mentioned, this is really new tech. How do you get people to even understand what this can do? And one of the most common queries we're getting in Gemini and Chrome is, what can it do?
yeah,
And so a piece of it is like making sure those chips or pillows have relevant things. And so you can, describe the Dipsy Trail route. It's actually an awesome trail if you're in the Bay Area. And ask other questions about, the context of this page so that you don't have to switch over to Gemini.
that's awesome.
And it gives you an awesome breakdown of the Dipsy Trail and all links to how to get there and what to look for. It's really, this is like super useful. You're totally in line with what you're asking.
Yeah, and if you're like, cool, I, want to do this hike this Saturday, trail hike to my calendar.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was
Saturday.
And like, can I take action then based on the context, which is awesome.
Yeah. And we want to make sure that you can see that it, creates
It's
the
fast
hike,
too. That's
can
awesome.
add it. It's super fast. I would say the, Gemini 3 was a huge step function in what we've been able to do, the work to really make sure we're integrated with other Google apps. And then the fast model, particularly for auto browse, was a big step function in both like speed, of course, but also quality. And I think that made us feel confident, like now we can bring more of these capabilities to users.
Yeah, that's that's awesome. Well, actually, I have another really quick question that's shown from these demos.
Oh, I was going to do one other one.
Yeah, please.
Okay, let me do one other one. So you can do new chat. And one thing you could do, you just moved in, you want to know what top rated plumbers are locally.
Hopefully
and draft
I won't need plumbers.
Hopefully you will need them, but you want to be
knock on
proactive.
Knock on wood.
You need your people, proactively. So you can draft a message and ask if they do free estimates when they're available. And this is another example of, okay, it knows we're looking at San Francisco now. Of course, you can put that in.
Nice. And actually, a quick question on this. What is the suite of tools that are available by default in context and then browser actuation?
It has connected apps and integrations to Workspace, YouTube, shopping, flights, and we're working on building a lot more.
I love this. And actually, one of my questions was going to be back through this thread while it's actuating and sort of searching the sort of agent browser human interaction cycle. Obviously, the internet has CAPTCHAs to like actually stop in some cases, like agentic systems from engaging on websites and using them the way that humans do. And I'm actually curious for Chrome specifically and with auto browse, like what is auto browse's, like if it hits a CAPTCHA, is it going to prompt a human in the loop to go and actuate and click the button, or how does that sort of cycle into some of these guardrails of the existing internet?
I think figuring out that balance of what should the agent do on your behalf, or what could you instruct it to do on your behalf that you would want it to do, and when does it make sense to have the human in the loop and actually take action, is something we're continuing to think really deeply about. And right now we're pretty conservative. Like we want the user, the human, to be engaged when it's like posting to social media or actually in that final purchase confirmation step. It will click through some pop-ups because it is eager to help you and get the job done. But we're more on the conservative side too, and often asking the user like, hey, how do you want me to do this? We support, if you use Google Password Manager, we'll support logging in on your behalf, but also we'll ask the user, hey, do you want me to log in on your behalf? And do you only want me to do it this time? Or do you want me to do it every time I go to this site? And so figuring out that balance and probably being overly conservative because we want people to trust the technology.
I love it. This is a great example of just like so many, like it's really doing the deep research of going and finding all these examples. So hopefully the research will be for nothing because I will never need plumbers.
Yes, I hope for that too. You have some recommendations here if you need it. We've also got some Gmail drafts in there if you actually want to send them. So if you went over to Gmail, you can email EJ Plumbing and Mountain View Plumbing.
Love it.
And I mean, I think like it's not 100% perfect. You probably noticed in this example, but like it did what she asked, like find plumbers, do draft emails. Pretty amazing.
No, this is awesome. I feel like I'm gonna spend the weekend sort of playing around with a bunch of these examples. So yeah, I love it. All these demos were great. Thank you. Yeah, what do you both think the sort of like trajectory, and like I feel like I'm like, as we're having this conversation, my head is spinning because it's like very clear that this is going to be the direction that things end up. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. It's what makes these fun. But like I think and I'm curious about the tension for like, obviously Chrome has like billions of users across all over the world, and like they're, one of the unique challenges I think that we have at Google is like, oftentimes, maybe Chrome, the Gemini button in Chrome is like the first time a user experiences something like this. And that education usability gap, there's all this pressure on like frontier AI use cases, but also like the average person has no idea how any of this works or like how to use it. And so I'm curious, like, as we're rolling this stuff out, like how y'all are thinking about meeting people who have like a very different level of understanding and also in some cases actually even enthusiasm for some of these products, which is also interesting.
Yeah, I mean this is such a hard thing for a product with an install base in the billions. Yeah. Like there's going to be a segment of your users who understand and dive into every single feature that you develop. And they want like more complexity, more
very
power.
Vocal about this.
And they're very vocal about it. And you do not want to take anything away.
Yeah.
It's like super important to serve that community because they often represent the future. But they also have very different capabilities and different understanding of how things work. And so you also have to be cautious that you don't lose like the long tail of people that are just trying to check their email or do something simple.
Yeah.
So we have to design for that full range. But I think the way we've implemented Gemini in the side panel makes it so that it's really easy to get to it, but also really easy to get it out of the way if you don't want to use it. And so I think, that's one of the most important aspects of the design is like power users can just hit Control-G and it opens and then they immediately can start chatting with it. People that are, used to using the UI will click on the button in the upper right corner. People that don't want it at all can remove it. So it's like just not in the interface. So there's like, we can meet the user where they are.
I love that.
And it is really, really tough. Like, I think we're very happy that so many people love Chrome right now. And we know that when we make really small changes, we can get lots of pushback, and people don't like change. It's a move by cheese type of challenge. And so figuring out how to really evolve and reimagine Chrome for users who are going to be like bleeding edge, we want to try this, while also making something feel familiar and just work is a real challenge, but it's also so incredibly exciting. And we have different experimentation channels within Chrome. And again, we know our G1 Ultra and Pro users, they know that they're on the bleeding edge and like really want to taste kind of the latest tech. And so like, okay, if auto browse needs some help at some point, they get it. And so I think that's fun, and it's also super challenging.
Yeah, lots of difficult problems. I have a question about auto browse. I also want to come back to the G1 story because I actually do think it's super important for users, but also for Google. On auto browse, I'm curious like how, like obviously historically, and I guess like Google crawling sites to do the search index is maybe an exception to this, but like historically a lot of the assumption was like there's a human that's going and visiting at a website, and actually like in the context of the browser, like the human was actuating the browser and controlling it and sort of in the driver's seat. And I think as we transition to now having systems and Chrome sort of doing this in some contexts on users' behalf with their consent, how people building stuff, how the internet should like be thinking about, different ways of interacting. Like I saw one example actually online a couple of days ago, which is like websites having like an agent button where that just like swaps to markdown so that the models don't need to like waste a bunch of context, like parsing CSS files and all this crazy stuff. Like, I'm curious if that's like if you think about that from like, is that part of the Chrome mandate to solve that? Is that just like the web ecosystem and obviously Chrome's a part of it and we should try to influence people, or like how I feel like lots of these like very macro internet scale questions to be answered.
I mean, I think Chrome is a really important player in the web ecosystem alongside other browsers, search, Google's ads business, lots of other Google teams are really investing in how do we make sure the web ecosystem is healthy and thriving. And within Chrome, we work with lots of other standards groups and, developers and publishers. So it's super top of mind. You start seeing some changes already where I feel like people are not doing SEO anymore, but they're starting to think of like agent optimization. Like how do you optimize
thinking about this all the time. Yeah.
I come from a security background. And so you see attackers thinking about like, okay, how can you take advantage of this? And so, we know with prompt injection, that's a new risk that we have to think about. How do we defend against? So things are evolving. I think it's still a little bit early to have the answers. And, we're having conversations and trying things both from a business model perspective, technology perspective, user experience perspective. And there's some learnings we've gotten on how to build this technology-wise from accessibility. People that use screen readers will have to navigate a web page and can kind of understand better what buttons to click or not. And so we've gotten some learnings from technology in the past and also figured out, okay, Chrome understands a ton about testing websites and doing some automation of browsing. The DeepMind team, with UI control, they have vision and understanding of how like a screen will look. And so how do you marry those areas of expertise to actually even make auto browse work in a way that is high enough quality and reliability to where you'd actually want to, have it do your Christmas shopping. And it's both early as well as it's moving super, super fast, which is exciting.
I thought you'd say it's early to start doing Christmas shopping.
Well, that's
it very much is.
Like you can never be too early.
Or too early.
But I would say also, over time, this is clearly going to evolve. Like the web is going to evolve and change. And today to buy things online through an agent, you often have to use auto browse and it'll literally navigate the page as you would. In the future, this will evolve more and more to using protocols and standards, and things like MCP and what we announced recently with UCP will create a much easier facilitation of commerce between users and their agents and other websites and their agents. And I think this is just like normal standard evolution, like we've seen so many times through the web, and it's fun to be at the forefront trying to work on this with all of our partners.
Yeah, it feels like the standards that are being created in the AI space are like happening so quickly. And I'm actually curious, like I don't have as much context on like some of them from historically, like that we've helped create at Google, and also like Chrome helps drive. But I'm curious if you all feel that as you're like trying to, like I feel this way from the developer perspective, as like we're trying to keep up with all the standards that go from zero to like all of a sudden it's the universal thing in the matter of weeks, which I feel like has historically never happened. And it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's everything in this moment with AI. Like you just see unprecedented pace across the board. So yes, I think that's true. We've always in Chrome kind of pushed to demonstrate what's possible and also worked with standards bodies. And oftentimes standards will lag a little bit because like you kind of want multiple vendors on board with this is the right thing. And so they'll drag on what is possible always, but I do think it's happening faster than ever. And that's, I don't know, uncomfortably exciting.
Yeah. One of the, we mentioned before all the G1 stuff, and actually for context, the Gemini and Chrome experience right now available to G1 Pro, G1 Ultra subscribers. Auto browse is in the US for Ultra only as well.
That's right.
Okay. G1 has, I guess maybe sometimes our customers think about this a little bit, but like it's actually become not to plug G1, even though it's paying the bills for a lot of things. Like it really is crazy how great of a value proposition is. There's like 20 Google products in there now, and with Ultra you get YouTube and a bunch of other stuff. I'm curious actually how we think about that business model versus like historically, Chrome, you just download and use for free, and same with Gmail and all these other things, and like sort of the opportunity and tension in the G1 experience.
Right. Yeah. It's a great question, I think, because it is an evolving part of our business model. Well, first of all, Google One, it's meant to be like one subscription family for all the best stuff you could get from Google. And we originally implemented this years ago. We created this years ago primarily for storage. That was like the key thing back, 10 years ago, where you might have a huge drive, that Google Drive, that has just like millions of files, or you might, more recently, it's been like photos and videos. And so we created the storage plan. That was the first thing. And we realized we had to create it because it's just like the storage costs were getting very high, but we wanted to be able to serve users with huge caches of files. And so we had to start creating a subscription model to support the business and be able to invest in it. AI is in a similar situation in that like the compute costs for AI are very different. They're much higher, especially for the high-end capabilities, than they have been historically for typical web transactions or other services. And so in order to be able to really offer powerful capabilities for our users, we had to have a business model that would support it. And so Google One has expanded to include AI Pro, AI Ultra plans, and this is like really cool capability because with it comes all these entitlements for using Gemini, using VO, using Nano Banana, and using them in quantity. So if you're using it very frequently, you can sign up for one of our subscription plans and get that capability. And it allows us to continue to invest in our infrastructure and our R&D and just like innovate like crazy for all of our users because we have this new business model. And I'm really excited about it. They're all growing like crazy because people like the products and are finding good value in the subscriptions that support them. And so it's really important to our future, and it's one of our biggest growth engines.
Yeah. I feel like one of the tension points is like, will G1 get 1 billion subscribers? Hopefully. That would be great. It'd be great for Google if that happens. But for people who are who are like earlier on that journey and like haven't gotten to the point where they become a G1 subscriber, I'm curious how you both think about like, how do we show those people the art of the possible? Is it like we need great on-device models because it's like just too at Google scale economically incapable of,
I mean, you can use Gemini and Chrome without a G1 subscription. Right now, auto browse is only to Pro and Ultra users. I think it's important for us and we actually have on-device models in Chrome desktop, which developers are using. And what we can actually put on the client that can be super helpful for developers to scale what they want to build, or for privacy or latency benefits. And so I sort of see it as a full spectrum, and we're going to keep pushing to make sure that the free experience in Chrome, which is probably the one that most people are going to use, is great, but also push what's possible for those pro users as well. So I see it as a balance.
And a key design of Google One is to make sure there's something for free users. So that's probably the best way to ultimately entice someone to want to be a subscriber and get more, is just like to try it.
Yeah.
And so, if you open a Google account, you get free storage, one example, but also you get entitlements to use Gemini for free up to a certain point. And then once you become, some of the examples Parisa was laying out, once you become a more sophisticated user, you want more advanced capabilities, you want to use it more, then that's when you start to approach one of the paying tiers.
You both mentioned some of the Gen Media models, which I'm actually curious, like how you think about that fitting into, obviously, like Chrome as in some sense a digital canvas, and now Google has the world's best Gen Media models, which has been really exciting to see. Like I'm curious if there's any like interesting, like the Nano Banana example, seeing an image and then being able to edit on the fly, but if there's other things that y'all are excited by in that space.
I mean, I think people end up doing a lot on the web. for sure, I've seen a bunch of interior design articles about using Nano Banana, but they're having to go back and forth between different apps. And so doing that in context is like a use case we've already seen, take off both within the team as well as like independently. I love Nano Banana. So I do a lot of, like, I was doing some holiday cards with pictures in the team and just building them in the browser.
The same thing.
Yeah. Our developers also appreciate, being able to try things out, get help on debugging something while they're in Chrome. And so, when it comes to probably having somewhat para-programmer, para-debugger helping you figure some things out within Chrome is something that people were doing. I've made some videos, I think for Christina's birthday. So like, being able to just do that with like a picture that someone shared over here really quickly is what I see. But I really do think so much happens in the browser across work, and especially for sort of knowledge workers. Like I spend on my laptop spending most of my time inside of the browser. So you really can just imagine like, how do you bring those capabilities into workflows? And that's what we're trying to do with Chrome.
And it's so new. Like we just launched this. I think we're going to learn so much about how people are wanting to use both the media capabilities that we offer in Gemini, but also like just using Gemini in general side by side with their web apps. It's like an amazing time to figure out what people want next.
I love that. I've got a feature request, which is, I'm actually curious in this like thread of multimodal and context compression and all this stuff. We've got to get like the Notebook LM audio overviews as like a Chrome context, sort of give me the overview of everything I just did in the last week. Using what you already have, just like
your week in review.
My week in review, just give it to me in like 5 minutes so I can like, what did I miss anything? What can
but
I
not in
jump on?
incognito.
That's
right.
And also in audio. I would love this. I feel like it'd be helpful.
We actually do have read aloud built in,
Nice.
and we want to build on that. And that's how I listen to some newsletters like on the way to work, just like do the read aloud. And we've played around with different, read it directly or do the audio overview for it, which I tend to prefer a little bit more.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the like collaboration story and just like also just the challenges to get to the place now where Gemini is like actually available in Chrome to many, many, many users over the last 6 months, like the model product scaling story. I'm curious if there's anything interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive collaboration, first of all, and one of our biggest ones from Chrome with the Google DeepMind team. We're a pretty distributed team, they're a pretty distributed team, and you realize when you start off that we're saying the same word, but we mean totally different things. So for example, wanting to build a high quality, safe, agentic experience, what quality means to some of the folks working in the modeling team or some of the folks, working in Gemini app team was very different than how we think about quality. And I would say, like really practically, it was like, we got to get in the same room with a whiteboard and actually just flesh some of this stuff out because, we're getting frustrated by each other, but realizing that we're just coming from different worlds and our worlds have to come together to really, be able to bring this incredible technology in an applied and really useful way. Tons of technical challenges that we had to solve. I think, when you're thinking about testing some, generative models, it's like, okay, this is how the text should look when it comes out. Is it good or bad? This is how the image should look. Is it good or bad? When you're trying to test, like, did this agentic task complete in the right way on the open web in a complex browser, that required a lot more tooling and understanding of kind of the agent's journey. And so figuring out the testing process and how do we work together to actually improve things, because debugging is harder. You've got a safety filter and security filter and, different orchestration layers. And so lots of engineering innovation to actually make this work in a way where we felt like we could bring it to users. And I think it's awesome because you really want like the world's best across all these different domains. And you sometimes lose sight of actually like how deep you are in your domain, and you're using acronyms and then they're using acronyms and you realize that sounds like Klingon. So we got to like figure out a lot of empathy and collaboration building, which we did in Gradient Canopy in our building and a bunch of other buildings as well. So
yeah, one of my favorite capabilities that came out of this rich collaboration is in the area of safety and security, where you know, when you bring together two really powerful things like a web app and the Gemini assistant, all of a sudden you have to be cautious about new issues. And one of those is like, you know, are the prompts that are going into the Gemini assistant actually good prompts that are aligned with what the user wants? And so to solve this problem, which is like clearly a new problem that research has shown is a real issue, we created this concept of the User Alignment Critic, which is effectively an Overwatch agent that is like looking at the prompts that are going by and trying to see if that really is something that you should be cautious about or whether it's okay. And so this is like constantly got your back. It's like a new thing that was invented with our team's collaboration to make sure that the user has a safe and secure experience using Gemini and Chrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been at Google for a long time, and I started in this security space, and I'm super proud of how kind of Google's constantly pushing on security. And so, you know, there's the Google DeepMind security team, and there's Google's product security team, and Chrome's security team, and a bunch of people red teaming this and finding vulnerabilities throughout. And we, you know, to hold DeepMind, look, like security is a core value for Chrome, and like for this to be successful, people need to trust it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we need to push the boundaries of safety on this. And I think User Alignment Critic was a result of that. We made some changes in Chrome to really take advantage of sandboxing so that auto browse, you know, is kind of limited in what domains it accesses that are relevant for the task, and all this other layered defense because there are open problems. And, you know, at the end of the day, people will use technology and products if they can trust it and feel safe. And so that's so critical to the success. And I think, you know, we've had some really aggressive launch dates. So that also gets teams working together because, you know, you march forward and people are excited to ship and build. And that really gets you to kind of focus and make progress. I think like innovation comes from constraint. And I think that was a big piece of it too.
Yeah, 100%. It is interesting to think about. I'm curious how much the like user today, but also in the future, is actually giving input on this example of like, how do I protect my best interests on the web? And I feel like some of these things, like Chrome obviously has tons of intelligence and can sort of impute these things by default. And there's obviously a bunch of reasonable standards, but like, do you think that will be something like folks will customize over time where it's like kind of like, I just directly type in Chrome, like, here's what my goals are, here's what I want you to, you know, protect me against, but also here are things I want you to set me up for success on, et cetera. Is that something that y'all have like that sort of personalization thought about?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's like a great element of what personal intelligence will become. It's like truly understanding your interests, but also like safeguarding your interests.
Yeah.
Making sure that, you know, if suddenly strange things are happening in your browser, like that you have never had a pattern of doing, we can recognize that and address it for you. So I think this is like just adding to the personal context story that I think is such an important part of assistance in the future.
I'm excited by this. I want Chrome to just come up with all this great online context engineering, personal context stuff for me. I think it'll be, yeah, it's going to be incredible to see it happen. Rick, Parisa, this was an awesome conversation. I feel like we'll hopefully do another one of these when we get more awesome AI stuff into Chrome. I feel like it's also like got the wheels turning in my head in a really interesting way. So I'm very glad that we sat down, and yeah, congrats on the launch. Thank you for taking the time to sit down.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.